Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan.
And I am Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life being safe on the outside.
Yeah, that's right. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear, that's why we're here.
We're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
we are going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Run! Well, uncles.
Hello.
We're back.
Yeah.
They can't stop us. Antifa has not stopped us.
Not yet.
Antifa.
They're trying. Because that's something apparently they also do. I don't know. We've been watching Fox News. So despite all that, we got a show this week, and it's a pretty fun one.
Yeah-ish. We're kind of all over the map with this one. I start us off not in a good place, and I definitely don't end in a good place. I'm going to talk about Trump's little Bible stunt the other day.
Yeah. But then I am going to give us a little bit of a breath of fresh air and do an intro to Shinto, or, Uncle Doug?
A Shintro.
Okay.
I don't know what Japanese for amuse-bouche is, but just imagine that. I'm sure it's a wonderful word. And then at the end of the show, we have an interview that is a little unconventional, and I think is kind of cool. So I'm not going to spoil it.
It probably shouldn't even have happened. By right.
Shouldn't have happened.
Definitely
I can't believe it
happened.
Yeah. We'll probably all be disappeared and dumped in the Great Salt Lake as a result, like everyone else.
But it's a surprise, and it I think you're not seeing it coming. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and then most wonderful of all, gang, is this weekend, June the 13th. We are having, for those who don't know yet, we're having another Zoom meetup.
Yay!
It's going to be this upcoming Saturday, June 13th, at noon o'clock Mountain Standard Time.
Yep.
So wherever you are on this flat Earth, you're going to have to use your protractor to figure out what time it is for you. But we wanted to make it a little earlier for our European friends and people in other parts of the world, if they exist. So please join us. If you send us an email to howto@howtoheretic.com, make sure you put Zoom or Meetup in the title, and we will send out the link probably the day before, right? So we'll just hit send all on the Zoom meetings the day before on Friday sometime.
Right.
All right? So we want to see your beautiful faces. Let's get ready to have some fun, and yeah, that's it.
Again, Uncle Doug won't be driving the car, so won't go into the ditch.
More than half the people will be allowed to see the first half of the show this time. So please join us. We can't wait to see you. And with that, let's do a show.
Let's do it.
Yeehaw!
Well, Uncle Dan.
Hey.
When I go out to the park, I like to take a book to read.
You're a park-going fool is what you are.
You know me, despite what the judge says, I go to parks. And I like a little reading material on a sunny day.
I never learned to read myself. Just
You know what? It's not worth it. It's just all bad news.
Yeah, I figure when it comes out as a movie, then I can enjoy it. Whatever.
That's why you express yourself through dance.
It's the truth. That's what I enjoy. You know what,
Doug,
though? I'm not the only one who never really learned to read, and I think Doug is going to talk to us a little bit about another fellow illiterate.
Yeah.
Another not reader.
Well, dear uncles, in March, we all went into lockdown because of a global pandemic. A novel virus was sweeping the entire world.
I don't remember any of this.
What's that?
I don't remember any of this.
I know. Well,
it's a bit of a blur.
Partially true. The only way to avoid it was to abandon our jobs, our families, our social circles, and our normal daily lives and hide in our houses. When we had to venture out of civic duty, or at least those of us who give a shit about civic duty, we wore masks and gloves. We discarded age-old traditions like hugging and shaking hands. Even, going to bars, restaurants, concerts, and even church have been seriously disrupted, although in the latter case, not nearly enough. Tens of thousands of our fellow citizens have died alone and afraid, and their families have been denied the basic dignity of even having a funeral. Our economy has hit every iceberg not melted by global warming, and families all over our blighted nation are running out of money and hope, and there is no end in sight. In fact, in our fair state of Utah, we had our biggest spike in cases just this week. So, hooray!
It was a record number in a one-day number, right, of new infections.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
that's almost every day is a new record number.
Yep.
It's fun. We get to watch records being set every single day. It's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. And yet, because this is either the worst timeline or because the alien running our collective simulation has fallen asleep on the evil meter, the global pandemic is not even the biggest news of the day. Just about 10 days ago, a white racist piece of shit who somehow, after nearly 20 burning red flags, was still a police officer, handcuffed and knelt on the windpipe of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and ever so slowly murdered him on camera for nearly 9 minutes. And so now our country has been further torn to shreds by protests of that murder, the inevitable violence and looting that accompanied those protests, and the state-sanctioned violence of myriad heavily armed paramilitary forces on even the most peaceful of protesters. Of course, a major cause and symptom of this rolling disaster is the incompetent, vile, and ignorant leadership that we, in our infinite wisdom, did not elect, but because of a sop to slave-owning states in the late 18th century, managed to squeak his way into the most powerful position in the world, and has managed to make all our worst fears come true. And he may very well get reelected. So many of our listeners do not live in our ever-diminishing United States of America, and I cannot imagine how disturbing and terrifying this all must look to them and the rest of the world. I have been a resident of this country my entire life, and I can barely make heads or tails of it. We never meant this to be a current events or political podcast, and we never meant this to be a dour or solemn podcast. We wanted this to be a place where people just finding their way out of religion could find community with those who had long ago made that transition, and we always meant this to be a fun and kind place for us to build that community. So in spite of the fire hose of terrible news spraying all over us from all directions like the rupturing of every sewer main in the world, we have endeavored to give you, dear listeners, a place to find refuge and provide you with 70 or 80 minutes of mediocre content to let your psyche catch its fucking breath.
Yeah.
But, of course, we've been overwhelmed with events and have been forced to speak to the unspeakable shit raining down on all of us, as Uncle Mark did in episode 131, where he broke down and cried like Nancy Kerrigan. But for the most part, we've tried in good faith, pardon that term, to mostly stay out of the politics of the day. And I was trying to do this over the past few days.
Yeah, but sometimes.
But I know. And I mean, because...
Come on.
It's just so overwhelming, and I kicked around a couple ideas for today's segment, but one image just kept flashing in my mind, and it was that of Donald Trump holding up a Bible in front of a church outside the White House. I know everyone's seen this image. It's so alarming in so many ways that I couldn't get my head away from it, and I finally gave in and decided we needed to talk about it.
But the most alarming way, the biggest way that it was alarming for me was that it became so clear that he just didn't know how to hold a book.
Oh, and we'll talk about that for sure. That was the strangest part of the thing. But I want to talk very specifically about that photo op. So for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to take it as a given that there is systemic racism in the United States, that systemic racism is most acute and deadly within our over-militarized and clearly poorly trained police forces, and that white America lives and has always lived in a different reality than black America. So I don't mean to be flippant or dismissive, but, other podcasts and other people are doing great work in discussing and dissecting those issues. So given that this is a religious criticism podcast, I want to stay narrowly focused on that photo op. Obviously knowing full well that the systemic racism and police violence happening all across the country are inextricably linked to it. So
yeah, like literally in the moment they were. So
yeah.
Proceed.
Let's start off with how this specific moment came about. A full week after the murder of George Floyd, Ivanka Trump and Hope Hicks, two of the most pointless women since any female character in a Michael Mann movie, decided that Trump, stinging from having been outed for hiding in his bunker for the past several days, needed a show of force. So this lack of brain trust thought it would be a good idea for Trump to stand in front of a Christian church and hold up a Bible. The nearest church was St. John's Episcopal Church, some 900 feet away from his Twitter bunker. There was, of course, one minor problem. In the 900 or so feet between his Twitter bunker and the church was Lafayette Park, where protesters had been exercising their First Amendment rights for a week in peaceful protests against police brutality. There was an elegant solution to this problem: police brutality. And so the avatar of all of our racist relatives, William Barr, ordered that police, some on horseback, all decked out in this year's latest fascist fashion, clear the square with tear gas, rubber bullets, and billy clubs. Of course, Kayleigh McEnany, taking a much-deserved break from calling the police on black bird watchers, has made a big point that it was not tear gas, but smoke from flash grenades mixed with pepper balls. She can, of course, eat a big old bowl of shit. Trump...
She does every day.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think, and the big question for me is, that makes it better?
Yeah, it's that. Yeah. This is one of the things that is so frustrating whenever you debate someone about political issues, particularly on the right, like guns. If you want to have a discussion about guns and you misidentify the specific brand of gun or make and model used by a mass shooter, how can we even have this discussion? It's like, God damn it. Okay, that's a different story. Trump began his historic shambling across Pennsylvania Avenue and unintentionally produced what may well be the most indelible photo of his presidency, where he walked in front of a graffiti-strewn wall with several iterations of "fuck Trump" for all to see.
That was amazing.
On a public toilet, which is just, sometimes it's not the photo op you want, it's the one you get.
Exactly. It's the one we deserve.
Yeah.
He arrived at the church, and after what must have felt like the Baton Death March to him, to have Ivanka pull a Bible from her designer handbag.
He doesn't know what that was, but go on.
Yeah.
And a reporter asked him, is that your Bible? And his response was, it's a Bible. Why the fuck would you choose that moment to tell the truth for the first time in your life? Of course it's my Bible. I read it every day. This is my favorite book. Yeah. I just don't get it.
You know how to lie. It's not something you're bad at. You might as well go with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what that Bible actually is? That is the thing that Ivanka has in meetings, and when you open it, it's got a hole carved out and it's got a cheeseburger in it. So it's like, it kind of keeps him quiet during meetings.
Funny. Exactly.
Yeah.
So to your point, Dan, Trump then goes on to hold the Bible in several different awkward ways. First looking at it as though he did not know what he had been handed, then showing the spine to the reporters, the only spine Trump has ever possessed, as if to prove that this was indeed the Bible. He then shook it up and down, apparently to make sure there was not a prize or cheeseburger inside, before finally holding it up high in his right hand for several seconds.
Did you see that moment where he just was trying to figure out which way? It was like he'd just gotten a first-generation artificial arm, and he was trying to figure out which way his hand should grasp it.
Yeah.
And you could see it took every ounce of his brain power.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. It literally looked like anyone who has held a Bible before. Like, I would be able to pose with a Bible, no problem. It's such an easy thing. You just, cradle it against your chest or your abdomen, and you just stand there. It's an easy pose.
Yes.
Or you do the Billy Graham, and you kind of hold it by the spine and wave it as you're talking.
Oh, sure. You could do that. You could do basically anything but the three things that he did.
Exactly.
Would look fine. But
I didn't realize that we were experts on Bible etiquette until now. But
right?
We are, and he's not.
It's just so weird. He might as well have balanced the damn thing on his head.
I know.
Yeah.
And it just pick a lane. Hold it by your side, hold it on your chest, or hold it up. Just pick a fucking lane, you idiot.
Yeah.
Okay. What seems crazy is that he did not go into the church or get a photo with the clergy of that church, who it turns out were horrified by what happened.
Right.
And wasn't one of them chased off with the tear gas?
Yes. Yeah. They had been offering refuge to protesters. And they were chased out of that church, and so Trump could show up. On the outside, he didn't go in. It's so weird.
And he didn't make any motion that looked like prayer. He didn't do any of the things.
Or invite one of the clergy to come, be in the photo op.
Exactly.
And say, we want to make sure everyone's safe, or do anything that a sane fucking person would do.
And he didn't have a verse selected to read, which any other president with a functioning communication shop would have done. He just held the Bible like a totem for several seconds and then walked back to the White House.
Yeah.
So the good news is that this photo op seems to have been a massive misfire and is blown up in his face. Several aides initially claimed credit for the stunt, and then as it fell apart during the course of the day, they all distanced themselves. However, I am not entirely certain that this was a misfire, because I am still trying to figure out what was being communicated in that moment. Trump holding up a book that he has obviously never read high over his head in front of a church he's only been to on his inauguration day is funny to us, but we were not the intended audience. So let's to dive into that, let's start with the obvious. Many people have called Trump hypocritical because he's personally so antithetical to what the Bible says, and certainly to the example of Jesus Christ, who said things like, quote, "Blessed are the peacemakers," or "Whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek, and love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you," right?
Fag.
Right.
In that narrow
Right,
context,
gay.
right?
By the way, it's a gay guy saying that, okay? I just want everybody to know it was the gay guy that said that. Go on.
In that narrow context, okay, Trump is a monumental hypocrite. But Jesus is not the only character in the Bible. And in fact, there are several that are very well Trump-like. Like take King David, for example. In just one story of many that we talked about back in episode 40 in the book of Samuel, King David kidnaps, rapes, and impregnates a woman named Bathsheba. When he finds out she's pregnant, he eventually arranges for her husband to be killed by the military. That sounds pretty Trumpy to me. And of course, for every verse that extols peace and kindness, there are several that justify violence, rape, and slavery. So let's leave aside the hypocrisy issue. Besides the Christians that support Trump of long ago either justified that support somehow or simply shut off that part of their brain anyway. So again, what was it that Trump and those around him were trying to say in that moment? And I do think those are two different things. Trump has obviously never read the Bible. And not being a church-going man, he is not educated or savvy in the the doctrines or mythologies of evangelical Christianity,
Or even how you say the names of the books.
Truly,
Yeah.
2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Boom,
Boom, that's the whole ball game.
bada
Bada
bing. So I think for Trump, he was trying to have a show of force, show he wasn't cowering in his bunker, and also wave to his Bible-thumping followers. What's also weird about this whole affair, and this is where it gets, to my mind, starts getting very dark, is who accompanied if it hasn't already.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is where it gets dark. Okay.
This takes a turn, huh?
It's weird.
You never see it coming.
Yeah. It's weird who did and did not accompany him. So Mike Pence was not there, and I don't know why. I would try to figure out if he was traveling or... But of all the people...
It smells like Pence to me.
Right?
Well, go on.
Yeah, of all the people that you'd think would be just down to clown for this kind of bullshit, it's Mike Pence.
Right.
But he was accompanied by Attorney General William Barr, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, and even Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley in full battle rattle, no less, decked out in his camo. So the law and the military, which again, I don't believe is a coincidence, were accompanying him to this event. Right. So as I thought about what this was meant to communicate and who it was being communicated to, I kept thinking about a book that Chris Hedges wrote in 2007 called American Fascists, the Christian Right and the War on America. Now, before anyone asks me, I know that Hedges has said some problematic things about atheism and atheists, but I don't know if either of you ever read that book, but what he wrote 13 years ago about Christian fascism and what we're seeing today is
in War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning?
No, it's in Christian American Fascists.
Oh, I didn't read that one. I read War is a Force.
Yeah, and that's a good book. War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning is a great book about why not just America but humanity can't seem to get away from war, and we treat it almost like a civic religion. But in and Hedges is a pastor or minister of some kind, I forget. But he predicted that if fascists were to return to America, they wouldn't be in jackboots; they would be carrying they would be bearing crosses.
Right.
So I'm going to read some quotes from his book that really get to kind of this moment. So, quote: "The radical Christian right calls for exclusion, cruelty, and intolerance in the name of God. Its members do not commit evil for evil's sake; they commit evil to make a better world. To attain this better world, they believe, some must suffer and be silenced, and at the end of time, all those who oppose them must be destroyed. The worst suffering in human history has been carried out by those who preach such grand utopian visions, those who seek to implant by force their narrow, particular version of goodness. He goes on, some human beings, the message goes, are no longer human beings. They are types. This new exclusive community fosters rigidity, conformity, and intolerance. In this new binary world, segments of the human race are disqualified from moral and ethical consideration. And because fundamentalist followers live in a binary universe, they are incapable of seeing others as anything more than inverted reflections of themselves. If they seek to destroy non-believers to create a Christian America, then non-believers must be seeking to destroy them. This belief system negates the possibility of an ethical life. And I'll read one more small one, and this one really kind of gets to the nut. Blind adherence to an absolute leader, especially one who permits violence, hands followers a license to unleash hidden, prohibited lusts and passions usually kept locked within the human heart. It permits followers to kill in the name of God. And that is what I think fundamentally was being communicated by that photo op.
Yeah, he was definitely communicating, like, look, he's openly calling for the military to go out in this. Right before he held up that Bible, he said, I will dispatch the military to states and take care of the problem if the governors won't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The governors that he called, what did he call them? Dummies or something? Jerks?
Yeah, something like that.
While he's hiding in his bunker, that he's openly calling for military belligerence. Of course, he's covertly calling or semi-covertly calling for the meatheads and the sovereign citizens and all the yahoos with their guns to do, to rid him of this infernal priest, right?
Yeah,
right.
And that's why I think it's fascinating that it doesn't seem like what he did had anything to do with anything that was actually in the Bible.
No.
Good or bad.
No.
It was...
No, he wasn't even referencing the book. He was
Correct.
it was just a dog whistle.
A dog
It was a
whistle.
shibboleth.
Yes.
He's using the Bible as its writers intended as a weapon.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and when you color in the context that this stunt was taking place as uniformed but unidentified paramilitary forces were violently putting down nonviolent protests of racism and police brutality, the message becomes fucking terrifying. I believe Trump was signaling to his heavily armed, hyper-Christian base, particularly those in the police and also in unofficial militias, that the time has come. And that the U.S. legal system and the military have got their backs. And, if that was the case, then I don't know if this stunt was a misfire. I guess it remains to be seen if the message is picked up by those it was intended to.
If it was meant, Doug, I think, to try to attract more voters from this broad nation to his cause, it's a misfire.
Yeah, but I don't believe it was.
If it was intended to activate irregulars to subvert democracy to keep him in power, I think it was as intended. And remember, Mike Pence isn't the only radical evangelical Christian in his midst.
Yeah,
Right.
Pompeo and Barr are also kind of end times Christian radicals. So the most powerful people around. I don't know what Esper, his latest in 25 secretaries of defense, what his religious thing is, but he's surrounded by religious fanatics.
Yeah,
and even if he doesn't get what makes them tick, he knows that those people will vote for him. So he'll hold up whatever they hand him.
exactly. And I think please go.
I think, Doug, that I don't share your optimism that Trump thinks that clearly. I
didn't mean to say that he did. I hear you.
I think that there are people around him that may want that message to get out. But
Fully agree.
But Trump himself cares about Trump.
Right.
And that's literally the only thing I've ever seen him conclusively care about.
And the only thing I would quibble with in that is that if the message was explained to him that, sir, hold this book up, and he said, why? And they said, well, it's gonna help perpetuate violence.
Yeah,
he would have held it higher. Yeah.
He doesn't care. If they handed him a fucking beach ball, he would have held it up. If they told him that would get him solidify his base.
I honestly think that it was. I don't go as dark as you do, Doug. To me, there are plenty of other reasons why, like, dopey Americans are putting on Hawaiian shirts and yelling boogaloo, and I don't think that Trump holding a Bible is one of them. To me, I think that Trump holding a Bible was literally my best guess, and all we're doing here is best guesses.
Yeah.
None of us have any secret insight. And QAnon has stopped taking my phone calls, so I don't know really what's going on.
Well, why does he need to take your phone calls when he's listening to them anyway?
Right, exactly. Because he then went on to he and Melania went to a Catholic shrine and did the creepiest photo ops there.
Which is saying
again
something.
Alone, just the two of them,
And the Archbishop of Washington was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, but literally, it's another one of in the long line of videos where he tries to take her hand. If you watch the video, it's so creepy. They're in front of a giant statue of Pope John Paul II.
It's actually life size. He was 12 feet tall.
He was a 15-foot tall man. And
Second tallest pope.
Donald goes to after Pope Longshanks III.
After Pope Dunkanator.
Pope the Stilt Chamberlain.
Pope Meta World Peace.
Trump goes to take Melania's hand, and there are lots of videos where she swats his hand away. This one, she just jerks like her arm's having a bit of a seizure, but he's holding on tight enough that like forcing her to. It's creepy and crazy and whatever, but I think he's just trying to. It's the clumsiest thing in the world, but I honestly think all he's trying to do is reach out to his his religious voters.
I don't disagree.
Are turning their back on him.
I think you're both right. I think his Stephen Miller and the shitbags around him have peppered his language with shibboleths to the QAnon people, right? To keep them excited, like 17 Democrats and 17 is important to them, and all these stupid fucking fringe garbage things. So I don't put it past them to do anything to try to foment unrest and chaos, because I think he sees that as his only way to retain power.
And I think the context matters so much here, because he didn't do this 6 months ago. He didn't do this after a mass shooting somewhere. He literally has been extolling governors to crack down on their populations. He's bringing prison guards into Washington D.C. to beat up peaceful protesters. And in the midst of all of that, and then calling for more violence, he goes and holds up a Bible in front of a church. I just don't.
After having peaceful protesters attacked before they even had the
curfew
imprimatur of curfew. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they didn't even ask them to leave.
No,
they just
attacked.
Started gassing. Now, there's one thing that I wanted to bring up, because Doug, you were talking about because somebody mentioned, I think Mark, you mentioned chaos and how this is sowing chaos. And Doug, you were talking about all of the different advisors that sort of did and didn't take credit for this. There's one advisor that you haven't mentioned that's in Trump's inner circle that he made a phone call to immediately preceding this event that I think might
American
be the answer.
American President Vladimir Putin?
Correct. I think that maybe this is literally just a chaos moment from a really savvy ex-KGB agent to try as a psyop against the United States of America.
Here's the thing. I don't know which of all of these options is the better one.
Right. None of them are good.
And all of them could be true. And this is the problem with such a dysfunctional fucking situation.
Right.
Is even guys like us that love to criticize and drill into conspiracy theories are wading into this swamp. It's so dysfunctional and so incoherent that it's a fucking Rorschach test. We can paint anything we want into this madness.
Yeah.
So this is my theory, which is mine, but I just I saw him holding up that Bible, and of course people have put up the pictures of Ahmadinejad holding up a Quran, or Saddam Hussein holding up a Quran, or Hitler holding up a Bible. And
that was Photoshopped, by the way.
The Hitler in the Bible.
No, there's one picture that was photoshopped that's Hitler holding the Bible,
a similar pose
in exactly the same pose. But there are plenty of pictures of Hitler holding up a Bible.
Yes. And those are, of course, apt comparisons, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, of course Trump doesn't know the historical context or anything like that. Duh. But would anyone listening to my voice believe that he wouldn't encourage militia violence if it were to keep him in the White House and out of prison?
I don't think so for a second.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I agree. I agree. Or maybe the simplest answer is he thought there was a cheeseburger in it.
Wait,
Or at least someone told him there would be.
he was so disappointed.
Yeah, so disappointed.
So, I don't want to. Let me just end with this. Look, this can be fixed. We need to vote this motherfucker out. There's a lot more to do than just that, but fuck, we need to start with that.
Yeah.
And remember, for people who are like, well, what's the difference between the candidate A and candidate B? You don't even think about Trump so much. Think about all the people that made that moment happen. Jared, Ivanka, Pence, Pompeo, Barr, Stephen Miller.
Carson.
When he goes, they go.
Yep.
If you can't think about anything else, think about the whole fucking rogues gallery of monsters and slobberers that surround this piece of shit. So that's an endorsement.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we get out of this hole I've dug?
Yeah, let's run from the not tear gas.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, moving on.
Uncle Mark.
Yes.
In this time of lockdown, one thing that I have been missing greatly is sushi.
Can I tell you something? Jesse and I, we ordered curbside from the greatest little sushi place in Salt Lake City, Takashi.
Oh, yeah.
They're still open and doing it. That was last night. Oh, my God.
I might do that tonight.
Miso soup nearly made me cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It did. I miss
I
it
hear
so
you.
much.
The mussel shooters, the quail egg at Takashi are the food. If I had to live on a desert island and only eat one thing, it would be those.
I don't know how well the quail eggs will do in curbside, but boy, what a treat! And it's so beautiful for them to be open. And,
and since we're missing out on that, perhaps Uncle Dan can bring us some wisdom and love from the land of the rising sun to quell us.
Some flavor.
Yeah.
To quail us.
Look.
To quail us.
To quail us. That's right. Listen, we've looked at gods and religions from all over the world for this show. We've looked at Norse, Mayan, Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Hindu. We've covered everywhere.
Yeah.
But I realized I couldn't remember us ever venturing into the ancient power and wisdom of Japan. Now,
I don't think we have much. You did the horrible self-mummification thing, but I don't think we've drilled too far into the philosophical end of things.
Yeah. So, I figured, well, I'll just look into that. Now, I need to admit right from the top that before I started researching for this segment, I knew almost nothing about Japanese history. I knew a little bit about like World War II. I'd watched enough TV and movies to know something about emperors and important people called shogun and samurai, and that they were all saved by Tom Cruise somehow. Yeah. Matt Damon was apparently busy saving China. It was all just kind of jumbled up and confused in my head. I was equally clueless, or maybe more so, about Japanese religion. I knew that there was such a thing as Zen Buddhism, and that when I had visited the Zen Center here in Salt Lake for a fun little sesh, it involved sitting on the floor and chanting a bunch of words I didn't know from a little chant hymnal for what felt like 3 days, but was probably less than 20 minutes. And I knew that there was this religion called Shinto, and that was it. I knew it existed. That was about all I had. I mean, I knew slightly more than that. I mean, friends who have come back from Japan fresh with their new cultural learning have explained to me what had been explained to them, which consisted largely of this. Everybody practices both Shinto and Buddhism, and nobody has a problem with that. Shinto is about life, so your living ceremonies like weddings are Shinto ceremonies. Buddhism is about things beyond life, so funerals are all Buddhist. And that's about the extent of it. If you got the really good tour, you learned that Shinto had shrines and Buddhism had temples, and they're sometimes right next to each other. But what the hell is Shinto? What are the beliefs? What are the rules and moral codes? Who started it? What's the story, Kenzo Mori? There's a little Japanese-Canadian journalist joke there. I don't know. I'd really searched for that way too long.
People love those.
I used so much time to get that dumb joke. Anyway, here's the thing. One article I read described Shinto as, quote, prehistoric, which makes it sound like it's one of the most ancient religions in the world. And maybe it is, but how would we know? Because the thing is that the word prehistoric just means that the religion predates written history. And here's one of the facts that I only just learned doing research for this. Japanese didn't have a full-fledged written language until the 8th century CE.
Really?
What?
That's what I said. I was blown away. And about that written language, it was Chinese. Basically, the far more advanced Chinese ventured over to Japan from the mainland and were like, hey, check out these backwater country hicks. I guess we'll help them civilize themselves. So, after centuries of, doing business and whatever, the Chinese eventually taught some of the Japanese how to read their language. Then, eventually, the Japanese adapted the Chinese characters for their own purposes. So, if the Japanese kanji, that's the written characters of their language, look like Chinese to you, that's because they are, in the same way that English is written using Latin characters, except for our nasty Arab numbers. So,
what a mess.
yeah, it is. It's very interesting, but I had no idea that they had no writing until then. So, all this is to say that we don't have any records from Japan that predate that time.
Not any written ones, right?
Right. Records, yeah, exactly.
Other archaeological stuff.
The earliest written history of Japan, the Kojiki, was put together sometime in the early 700s. For me, a guy who's used to talking about things that are claimed to have happened thousands of years before the Common Era, that feels like yesterday. So, what we have of Japanese history before then is, well, spotty. Written histories are often misleading and favor the viewpoints of the writer, but we can at least compare multiple accounts in the hopes of getting some sort of facts right. But oral histories are, well, let's just say that my family can't agree on whether Grandpa's famous turkey incident happened on Thanksgiving or Christmas. So I don't hold out much hope that a history passed down in a centuries-long game of telephone is going to be overly reliable.
Don't the police records say which one it was?
We just don't look at it anymore. It's too painful for everyone involved. So, with all of that preface, let's talk about Shinto. The word Shinto is actually Chinese.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's a combination of Shen, and don't at me about my pronunciations of anything, which is the Chinese word for God or gods, and Dao, as in Taoism or the Tao Te Ching, meaning way or path. So it's the way of the gods. The reason it's a Chinese word is that before the Chinese showed up in Japan, they really only had this one religion, and everybody believed in versions of the same thing, so they didn't have to name it, but because there was nothing to differentiate it from. When the Chinese showed up, they had a few different religions going on. Confucianism was big, and so was Buddhism. So the Chinese needed a way to talk about what the Japanese people were doing religiously, so they named it the Way of the Gods.
It's like white privilege in Utah. I mean, why do we even need to put a word to it?
Right. It's just the way of things.
It just is.
Exactly. In Japan, the practice is sometimes called kami no michi, which is just the Japanese version of the same phrase, Way of the Gods. So, with that being the name, let's talk about the, quote, gods of Shinto. What we're talking about are known as the kami, and I don't think that God is the right word to really translate that to, though I'm at a total loss to come up with a better word. They're sometimes called spirits or holy powers or even just phenomena. A small number of kami have quasi-personified forms in some of the old stories, but they're usually not people, except that modern Shinto priests also sometimes totally anthropomorphize the kami. So I guess dealer's choice on that one. The kami are magic, for sure. They inhabit all kinds of things like mountains or trees or doorways or important people or roads or your ancestors. You just kind of stick them where you want them, I guess. They control weather phenomena like snow or tsunamis. But interestingly, unlike the gods of pretty much every other theistic religion I've read about, they're not beings that really establish a personal relationship with people. Unless they do. But they don't. I mean, sure, you might go to pray to a kami to ask for good luck when you're taking your final exams, but you don't expect much. Mostly, Shinto believers spend their time trying not to piss the kami off. Because those shits are mean sometimes. Basically, you go to the Shinto shrine to show the magic spirits that you're nice and respectful so they don't drop a tree on your house, which they might anyway. Because here's the thing. Kami are not moral characters. They aren't good or bad. They just are. It's not good or bad that the kami of the tsunamis just sent a huge wave that destroyed a bunch of stuff. That's just what the kami does. That's that kami. It's not a moral judgment that happened. That if you get a good rice harvest, that's not a moral judgment or whatever. That's just you're just glad it happened. You're glad that the kami of the rice helped you out this time.
Yeah,
and that's how it goes.
He was in a good mood today, but tomorrow, who knows?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's easy to piss these guys off, and not easy. Like, you don't really get anything good out of them. You just hope for not bad more often than not. Now, all that said, there are some main mythological figures in the kami pantheon. Everything started apparently with Izanami and Izanagi. These are the creator kami. The islands of Japan were created, for example, when those two dipped a spear into the ocean and some mud fell off, and that made the islands. From there, they created everything else. Izanami, the female, though some say that they're actually genderless or two-gendered, but yes, for the most part, she's the female one. She gave birth to the fire god, which was careless of her because she was instantly burned to death.
Oh.
At which point she went on to the underworld, but her brother/lover, Izanagi, didn't want to lose her, so he followed her down there and found her in the darkness and said, "Hey, come with me." And she was like, "Cool, just, don't look back at me." And then they're walking and he does look, and she's covered in maggots, I guess because she's dead. And then 8 terrifying female kami emerge from her and start chasing him, and there's a big chase, and he keeps throwing food to them, and they keep pausing to eat it, which slows them down.
Story
and finally
took a really weird turn.
Right? And then he manages to get out of the underworld, slamming the door behind him so that they couldn't get out. And then he washes himself in the ocean because purification is very, very, very important in this religion. Now, does that sound like it has echoes from Greek mythology in it or ancient Chinese? Is it possible that other people's stories got mixed in? Well, duh. This is what happens when you don't write down your own shit. Other people's shit gets mixed in, and then you've got a jambalaya of nonsense. Anyway, Izanagi at some point gave birth to the sun goddess Amaterasu. God damn it. These are hard. But wait, wasn't Izanagi the male? How could he give birth? Well, yes, smartass, he gave birth to her out of his eye, so there's no need to make it weird.
Oh.
So, and Amaterasu is a super important kami because she was the mother of all the other kami. She's the sun god, she's the goddess of the sun and the universe, and basically everything important. And, oh, by the way, all of the emperors descended directly from her, which is why you're not supposed to question them or ever wonder if they're really all that special, because they super duper are. So maybe that is the point that makes Shinto a religion. Maybe the primary function of a religion is that one group can use it to subjugate another. I'm not going to get into Japanese political and military history, but Shinto has been used by the ruling classes as a way of quelling dissent on and off for a minute. But here's the thing. Other than some undefined ideas about nondescript spirits that may or may not care about you and your needs, there's not much to Shinto. There are no doctrines, no rules or moral codes to live by, no supreme or divine edicts or ways of conducting oneself. There's really not much to make it a religion at all. It barely goes beyond just basic observation of the world and nature. And as a matter of fact, I'm hard-pressed to see what the point of it is beyond kind of giving folks something to do. It's like the Japanese took their observations and applied the human evolutionary mechanism of agency detection, but then didn't apply the human need for it to mean anything, which I think is kind of cool. They basically just like, the commies, huh? Right? Am I right? And that's about it.
Well, it's so funny, because you were saying about how it's been used in society, because when I was doing research for some segments a while back about 20th century dictators and, religion versus atheism, I was looking at the Japanese, the Imperial Japan in the Second World War, and they kept, the articles kept talking about how Shinto was instrumental in this kind of belligerent idea of Japanese nationalism.
Right.
I'd be like, okay, great. What about Shinto enabled that? And I kind of couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, it did.
It was mostly because when the Japanese emperors came back, that's what they hinged it on.
That's where they claim their divine right.
We are descended from this sun goddess, and therefore we deserve this. This is ours, or whatever. Are
you saying that worshiping another human being as potentially divine could have bad outcomes?
It can if it's not me.
Right.
If you worship other, not like everybody else is bullshitting. I'm actually divine, so it's fine to worship Uncle Dan, not everybody else though.
Gotcha.
You're divine. Actually, I think we're talking about the kind of 80s club celebrity culture phenomenon, Divine, the drag persona.
Yeah, that's
and
me.
John Waters, regular. Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
Divine handed that mantle down.
I have seen Uncle Dan in drag, and I didn't hate it.
That's true. Yeah. We both have.
Everybody's seen Uncle Dan in drag. I've been more in drag than it's very silly. I've been in I've done drag a lot. Anyway, that's it.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's that was my introduction to a religion that I'm not 100% convinced is an actual religion.
Well, that's a first on our show.
Yes, indeed.
So get Shinto, everybody. It can clearly mean whatever you want it to.
Let's put them on the list.
Yeah, put it on the list. All right, let's move on.
Fair uncles.
We
have some folks to thank because they were generous and kind and loving and decided to give us to join the ranks who have started to give us a little bit of money per episode so that we don't all flush our own heads down the toilet. Mm-hmm. And so we owe some thanks to these people. Thanks so much to Darwin's Revolver, to Richard, to Moist Titivolus. Thank you so much. Okay.
I had that once.
And let's see. I don't know who's up. I think it's. I'm going to say it's Uncle Doug who's up to give a saint to Zilch.
Zilch. Okay. Zilch, your patron saint, is Saint Saturnella the Generous of Jaffina, Sri Lanka, and I am looking at a map right now. Saint Saturnella is the patron saint of all non-essential oils, ineffective sound baffling, and that terrible feeling when you realize you didn't turn off the Zoom call before calling all your coworkers idiots. That happened to someone I might know.
That is a busy saint these days.
I apologized for that, you guys. Come on.
That is a busy saint these days.
Right? All right. But we're not done yet. Because
Well, Dan, wait, just if I may.
Oh, you may.
Another saint just slid in under the wire.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was just looking at our emails, as we say in Utah, and another saint slid under the wire.
Who's
shall
that?
This is for Gordon and Katie.
Oh. Okay.
So shall I bestow a saint upon
Yeah,
them?
please do.
Okay, good. I'm glad we caught them in time. So, Saint Gordon and Katie, you obviously, those are solid names. Gordon's a solid Canadian name. I don't know if you guys are in Canada. But you require Saint Roderick the Petite of La Mancha. And that is the patron saint of rutabagas, marriages of inconvenience, and the Bay City Rollers management team. So there you go. Very critical saint.
Oh.
Critical saint.
Very good stuff. Excellent. Yeah. And I must bestow upon Robert a heaven.
Yes.
For he has earned himself eternal glory. So, Robert, you've heard the phrase heaven on earth, right? Well, buddy, after your death, you'll be the only guy who really understands it. That's because after you die, like Dracula, the Highlander, or the three Nephites before you, you will be sent back here to Earth to walk this beautiful planet for eternity.
Oh, boy.
Here's the thing, though. You won't have to worry about food or water because you're an eternal being now. You have no physical needs. You'll never suffer an injury or wheeze your way through an illness or allergy again. You'll never be tired or need a break from strenuous activity. You can't drown or break a bone. You, my friend, are indestructible. Not only that, but you'll also be perfected psychologically and emotionally. You've reached nirvana, baby. There's no suffering or anxiety. It's all peace and love for you all the time. Isn't that great? So, there you'll be, walking among the sad, dejected, freaked out, pain-stricken beings just like you once were. They'll scream at each other, they'll cry, they'll attack and cajole each other, and you'll observe with the patience and loving detachment of the Buddha. Nothing can harsh your buzz. Of course, you'll also see them at their best, their most loving and happy moments, and because you used to be one of them, you can join in these joys and participate in their celebrations. You're free to have deep, amazing relationships with them. Sex, marriage, whatever you like. Of course, they'll eventually age and die, and you never will, which will confuse and sometimes actually genuinely destroy some of them. But you'll be fine. You'll watch as history unfolds. You'll see their wars and their reconciliations. You'll shake your head knowingly as they continually sit down on their own balls, never seeming to learn the lessons from the past. You can try things if you want. Meddle! The other gods always have. Try to teach them the error of their ways. Tell them how to love each other. Give them better guidelines than they've ever had before. A bunch of them will believe you and follow you. Of course, they'll just fuck it up in some way or another because that's what we silly mortals do, and you'll get to watch as we turn your message of beauty and light into a damned good reason to kill each other. And who knows? Maybe that's exactly what will happen. Maybe we'll all kill each other. Maybe we'll wreck the environment beyond redemption or nuke the shit out of the world and everybody will die of radiation poisoning, or maybe a new virus will emerge and finally do away with humanity forever. However, after humanity dies away, as it certainly must at some point, you'll be there to see it, and then you'll get to explore an Earth without us. See what happens when nature takes back all the cities and roadways. That'll be interesting, right? And then, well, I guess eventually the sun will go nova and the Earth will be obliterated. That'll be weird. You'll be fine, of course, but there won't be a planet for you anymore. So, sorry about that. I guess you'll just float out there, alone with your thoughts in space. A planet unto yourself. Hey! Wow, you'll be a planet! Cool! a living sentient planet, floating peacefully forever in the void of eternal space. Enjoy!
So he's kind of the Highlander.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
there can be only one.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just doing the backstroke through the eternities.
Yeah, and you want to be the Highlander of Highlander Part 1, not Part 2.
Or the series.
I'll tell you about I wanted to do a Highlander children's show, like a children's cartoon, but the catchline is there can be only fun.
I was going to do...
I was hoping you were going to say that they were going to murder each other until there was only one child left.
Well, that's kind of just how life is these days anyway.
I was going to do a Spanish language version, and the tagline was there can only be Juan.
Okay. It didn't have to go there. It didn't have to become racist, but I guess that's what you do.
That's what we do here. Anyway, thank you guys, all of you donors, so much for all of your beautiful donations. We appreciate you the most. If any of the rest of you would like to be so mostly appreciated, you may do so by going to howtoheretic.com, clicking on the support thingy, and that takes you to the Patreon thingy, and then you can sign up and choose whatever level you want to contribute, and we will lavish our praise upon you.
That's right, because the only color the uncles see is green.
Yep. Well, or stars. We like stars. Go ahead and give us 5 stars on any of the places, and we'll love you for that too.
We sure will. Thank you so much, you guys.
We love you.
Let's continue. Uncle Doug.
Uncle Mark.
We have a very special couple guests on the show today.
Indeed.
Who are also listeners, which is extremely cool, which is a bit of a pickle for them because our guests today are not supposed to be listening to us at all. What? And special guests, can you tell us why you aren't supposed to be listening to our show?
Well, you see, we are missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's right.
My favorite name, we're Mormon missionaries.
Yeah, we have current Mormon missionaries on the show, you guys.
Yeah, we are behind the wire.
We are inside the wire, and the fact that there are missionaries out in the field listening to our show gives me life. So we've got Elder A and Elder B here, and they are in an undisclosed location, toiling in the fields that are white. And via methods that we won't ask them to disclose here on access on the show, they have access to the devil's internet. And I want to credit our friend Bryce Blankenagel for connecting us to Elder A and B versus his Glass Box podcast. I heard you guys on there the other day, and it blew my mind. And we're so happy to have you on the How to Heretic. So, guys, when Elder A, I certainly heard you talking about this. You lost your faith on your mission. And before you tell us how, can you tell us what sort of Mormon and what sort of missionary you were before that?
I mean, I definitely wasn't the best. Before my mission, you could say I was kind of one of those kids who was kind of believing because, parents are like, go to church every week, go to Mutual, get your Eagle Scout type thing.
Yeah.
And then I guess I kind of had a testimony just because that's all I really knew.
So you did all that stuff. You were an Eagle Scout. You went to seminary and all that stuff.
Yep. Graduated seminary, all that. And I guess I kind of had a testimony or else I wouldn't have left at all,
Right.
But the MTC is really kind of where I guess my testimony grew. I mean, they put you in a place and have you listen to church doctrine for 9 hours a day and try teaching it and telling you the whole time that you're feeling the Spirit, you're going to eventually, quote unquote, feel that Spirit or want to feel it so much you'll trick yourself into feeling the Spirit,
Sure, you're oversaturated. You're overstimulated with nothing but affirming information.
Well, and then I think for Elder A and B, I think you could affirm this. There's almost like a competition in the MTC, right? Like,
oh yeah,
everybody's trying to kind of out
who has the most spiritual story.
Yes, everybody's trying to out testimony each other, and it's you wake up, you start praying, you go to classes for 9 hours a day, you pray before breakfast, you pray before lunch, you pray before dinner, you pray like 15 other times, and if you come out of that without having some kind of a testimony, everyone around you's like, what happened? What's wrong with this person?
Yep.
Yeah. So you went out into the mission field and you basically had cobbled together some kind of testimony and you'd convinced yourself you could make it work. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, basically I got to the mission field really excited, ready to work. I'm gonna go preach, baptize, harvest the field. All that good stuff. Yeah,
And then what happens? Something changed.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of was a gradual change, then a sudden change. It was like a slope to the cliff, because like
Yeah.
I got to my first area with my trainer, and he wasn't as hard of a missionary, that I wanted to be. And so I remember my trainer, I got mad at him. This is just kind of to prove how much I kind of had believed back then, how much I really believed back then. I got there, and my trainer, he wouldn't wake up at 6:30, and I was really mad at him for that. And then like a month into us being together, he did the unthinkable and downloaded a YouTube video onto his phone at the library. And I almost called our mission president over it.
Oh my God.
I didn't, luckily, but I really was close to it.
Well, and for people who don't know, and this kind of speaks to the predicament that you guys are in right now, for people that don't come from the Mormon experience, it is very snitch based, right? And the mission is the most snitch based part of Mormonism. Like you're there to really spy on each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the whole reason why they put us together in pairs.
That's right.
Yeah.
So walk us through. You were the gung ho greenhorn who was.
Oh yes.
I can't imagine how annoying you were to your trainer.
I felt so bad, and I served around him again near the end of his mission, and that was after I had kind of lost my faith, and I had definitely chilled out as a missionary because of that, and we became pretty good friends after that.
Sure.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I'd repented of my sins.
So what happened to challenge your faith other than seeing him download a YouTube video?
I guess really just the whole culture of being a missionary is the church hiding information from you about the history, going door to door and having people bring up that information. You try to sell them on the Book of Mormon, but they'll hit you with some quote unquote anti-Mormon doctrine. Oh, Brigham Young was a polygamist. No, terrible. You can't say that. You're not allowed. That's not true. We don't do that type thing.
Right.
I guess the first real encounter I had with church history was a guy in the same area where someone else gave me the CES letter. I'll get to that in a second. We went over to his place for a lesson, and he had set out chairs. He was a really, really believing Christian. I think Baptist. I'm not sure. He'd set out like pamphlets, and inside those pamphlets, it had different church teachings like the Adam God theory, and then the blood atonement and stuff like that. And we saw that, and we basically just ran, me and my companion. We're like, man, I hate that everyone just tries to anti us all the time,
Right.
And then I get another companion. I'm still in that same area, and we're tracking actually around that guy, like one neighborhood over, and knock on someone's door, and we start to give our spiel. We're the missionaries from the Church of Jesus, blah, 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 blah. Come and join our church and give us 10% of your money.
Right.
And he's like, oh, you guys are Mormon missionaries here. I have some questions I want you guys to answer. And he walks back into his house for a second, and he goes and he grabs a copy of the CES letter. And that's something that I had heard about. Just kind of, I've heard the name. I didn't really know what it was.
And for sorry, I'll interrupt you for 1 sec, Elder Ray. For non-Mormon listeners, the CES letter, and we'll include a link to it in the show notes here, is it's kind of like Martin Luther's 99 Theses, right? It's a faithful Mormon an ex-missionary like did a mission like these guys, had some questions about the provenance of the Book of Mormon and early church history, and had a family relative prompt him to write a letter to a church education service person,
System,
right, Doug?
System. Yeah, church education system. And it was the president he wrote the letter to the president, Jeremy Runnels.
Yeah.
And this letter is basically asking questions about a lot of very problematic things in Mormonism, especially early Mormonism.
A lot of plagiarism in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so he wrote this in an earnest, really believing earnest attempt to get some answers, and he never got one. So that's what the CES letter is, and it's available online. We'll include it in the show notes. But anyway, sorry, continue, guys.
No, that's all good. So he gave us that copy of the CES letter, and just kind of out of, I guess, we didn't want to look like we were rejecting his gift to us because we had just gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon, and so we took it and we
It's just manners. It's just manners, yeah.
And we put it in our bag and we finished tracking the street, and we get back to the apartment and we open it up and we see really kind of what it is. And I'm really intrigued. Like, I kind of want to read this. What's so bad about it, you know? And my companion's just like, throw it away. We don't need that. Throw it away. And so I threw it away. And then he goes to study, and I go and grab it and I pick it back up. And I read it.
Ooh.
And that was kind of where I really started to lose my faith a lot. I remember reading through that, and because it really drops a lot of bombshells. It's blunt and to the point and talks so much about church history and uses the church to do it.
Right.
That was kind of like the key point. That I read through the CES letter, and the way it just put the different things that I had heard into perspective and used the church's own sources and links against it. Kind of
So it's very hard to tar it as anti, which is just a term Mormons use for anything that is not absolutely orthodox information. Yeah.
And so it's like, these things are literally on my phone in the Gospel Library app. Like, that's kind of crazy. That next day after I had read through that and I was still trying to process it, I remember being such a weird day because I just was so out of it mentally. My whole world had kind of collapsed, and I just remember that feeling. I can't even describe it. I just had such a sunken feeling to me that whole day. Like, what am I going to do? You know? And
so you read it all in one night, and then the next day you just had to go about missionary business as usual.
Yep, basically.
Oh, and just so our listeners understand the lonely place you're in, or you were in, Elder A, is that you if you were to go to your mission president, who is the person you're supposed to go to with troubles and problems and concerns, if you were to say to him, "Hey, I read the CES letter," and you would be in colossal trouble, right?
Oh yeah.
And so you couldn't write home. You couldn't talk to your companion about it. Mm-hmm. You couldn't talk to your mission president. You had to live in your own head with this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how lonely was that?
It was definitely a hard couple weeks processing it. I did have one awesome friend back home who I was able to get in contact with and talk to a little bit about it. And he was the person who sent me a device that I was able to access the internet with later. So that was nice of him.
Interesting.
He definitely has helped my faith transition a lot because of that.
Awesome. Awesome.
And so, I read through that. I went about kind of being a normal missionary for the next few weeks. And then I got that device, and I started to research on my own a little bit more in depth of the things that the CES letter claims.
Right. And I'll interrupt you one other second. So again, we have a lot of non-Mormon listeners who may not understand what a blackout you guys live in, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have access to the internet. You don't have access to email for the most part, right? You are not supposed to do anything but be a missionary, not read newspapers, not watch television or movies, et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
Nothing.
Yes. It's to the point where, like, we have phones because, I mean, we live in a modern world and we need to have a device to contact people with, but they're locked down so much that you can't even access a video that your family sends you through Google Hangouts.
Right.
Wow.
For your friend to send you this device completely opened the universe to you.
Oh, yeah. It was nice. I got to watch movies. Ooh. Started developing a quote-unquote sleep disorder.
Because you were up till 5 a.m. watching movies and reading shit.
The only free time, that and baths.
Right. I love what you said on the other podcast about how you're going to have to feign surprise when you watch Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, that was the first movie I watched. My friend had bought it on Amazon, and so he
That's
let me
hilarious.
use his login and watch it.
That must have blown your mind after being in the media desert for however long.
It was amazing.
So, in Elder B, we want to kind of get to, your story and then how the two of you found each other, which is, to my mind, the most remarkable part of this story. But, Elder A, once you came to this realization, you're like, okay, I don't believe this stuff. If that's the place you got to, was there any consideration in saying, I'm done, I'm going home? Or did you, or did you decide, well, obviously you decided you had to stay. So was there a moment where you thought about throwing in the towel?
Definitely. I definitely hit that point where I'm like, I really don't believe this anymore. And I thought about going home, but I thought about my mom and my dad, and they are
stalwart
fanatics.
Yeah, they are insane.
Fanatics, you'd say.
Yeah. My mom is like the type of person who goes above and beyond to research things about the gospel and try to like bring it, like things like Heavenly Mother and like the deeper doctrines that makes her feel so spiritual anyways. To the point where, and she's always been this way. She's just very controlling and very controlling about about her kids. She's told us, me and my siblings on multiple occasions, you're mine until you're 26 or married.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Because that's when we're off of her health insurance, she says.
Jesus. So you're better off staying out there.
I really am, honestly. Like,
that's so fucked.
Yeah, that and a couple other reasons for staying out. Yeah, it gives me enough motivation to keep acting.
Can I ask how far along you guys are in general terms? if you just want to give me, do you have half a year left, 3/4 of a year?
I'm on the downward stretch, around-ish the half year mark left.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm near the end, close to the end. Yeah.
You can smell the barn. You're almost done.
Home stretch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be some relief.
Yeah.
Definitely is.
So, Elder B, is your story somewhat similar to Elder A's, in as far as like you had faith when you were there and you lost it in the field?
Well, no. My grandparents, they offer a lot of stuff to their grandkids to go out. So I did, and I got a bit of a testimony in the MTC, but that died pretty quick. And then I've just been taking it for a long time.
So basically what you're saying is you're for sale.
Basically, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Look, everybody's for sale. We're just haggling over the price, guys. Come on.
And I got a good price, so I'm all right.
If it's not a pair of jet skis, then I think you sold yourself short.
So you guys got crazy. You guys came to this this faith crisis separately, but is that correct? But somehow you ended up together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that is crazy. The odds. So either that is crazy long odds, or there are more missionaries like you than you think.
Well, that's the thing. Is not only did you end up together, but I would assume that there are many missionaries who've lost their faith, and even that are companions, but just can't ever say it, right? Like the danger of exposing yourself. Terrifying, right?
Terrifying, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit on the Glassbox podcast. But that's something that I had kind of learned how to subtly do with some of my past companions, just to kind of judge where they're at.
I remember you said something like, why don't we read up on the first vision? And there's more versions of the first vision. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
But Elder B is the first one that you got the desired response out of. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was funny because we were talking about the Come Follow Me, that the Book of Mormon, Come Follow Me, and the typo that they printed in the print versions. Do you guys know anything about that?
I for some reason I think I do, but remind me.
So in the first print versions of the Come Follow Me for the Book of Mormon, obviously the Book of Mormon has a lot of stuff in there that's not okay. Like the White and Delight sub in Second Nephi is the example that I'm trying to bring up. And so during that portion of the Book of Mormon, when they're teaching about it in the Come Follow Me, they have a paragraph in Come Follow Me, the printed version, that says basically the Lord cursed them with dark skin because they were wicked. It basically says that. I could go pull it up if you guys want me to.
Well,
And
it sounds less like a typo than a Freudian slip.
oh yeah,
right?
well that they say it's a typo. And so
Less like a typo than doctrine.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you guys get put together, right?
Mhm.
And Elder A, I seem to remember you saying that you had your suspicions about Elder B
Yeah.
from before you guys were put together. So what was that suspicion? And then when did you just kind of like, how did you get to that moment where one of you said to the other, guess what, dude?
Day one.
It was like,
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
It was day one actually. It's funny because so before we were companions, we served around each other, and they had exchanges with us, and we were all together in an apartment, and we stayed up like till like 5 just talking about a bunch of different stuff. And from that I could kind of tell, like, I feel like if I were to be put with him, I would be able to either A, convince him to stop believing, or B, he already is no longer believing.
Right.
And so we got together, we started talking about that. And I think just at one point, Elder B turns to me and is like, so do you even believe in this? And I was kind of like shocked. And I was like, not really.
And then we just went downhill from there.
And
You guys must have been so relieved
Oh my
to
goodness.
finally have somebody to say something to, right?
Oh yeah.
It was glorious.
It was
Glorious, exactly.
so nice.
It was a spiritual experience.
Definitely the Spirit was involved in us getting together. I mean, the mission president prayed over who he should put together, and he put us together. So, I mean,
And he was right.
he was right.
And he was totally right. So I want to talk for a second about, I sent you guys a couple links beforehand. One was to our segment in episode 50 about blood atonement. And one was a sillier one in episode 132 about the Moon Quakers. And I just want to have a quick discussion about what Mormon missionaries, we've already touched on it a bit, what Mormon missionaries really know about the church before they're sent out to sell this thing. And obviously, Elder A, and I imagine Elder B, you didn't really know any of the stuff in the CES letter.
None of it.
None of it. And things like, as you mentioned, Elder A, white and delightsome. Like the church's horrendous history involving race relations that really only technically, and I'm using air quotes to the point I'm dislocating my fingers, ended in 1978. But you guys, did you know anything about that?
I did not.
Anything about that?
Nothing.
No,
Right.
we knew nothing about those kind of things.
Wow.
And I gotta say, like, my mission predated the internet, and that makes me sound very old, but the internet isn't that old, so don't judge me.
Whatever, dude.
So there were people who knew anti-Mormon stuff, and they would spring it on us, but I can't imagine what it must be like in the age of the internet, in the wake of the South Park episode, and you know what I mean? Like, to go out there and try and talk to people about the gospel, knowing that they probably know more about actual church history than most missionaries. How hard is that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen myself and other missionaries struggle with that a lot, especially when going out and proselyting and going door-to-door tracting. I've had companions who get really frustrated at just the amount of anti-Mormon doctrine is brought up to us while we are going door-to-door. Because
Right.
almost every person that knows about the church will bring something about like that up. It's like, oh, you guys are them polygamists, right? Or just so many different things about the church history that
You can't teach those people.
so many things about church history that we just don't know. We've never been taught about. We have never been taught how to answer these questions.
That's so crazy to me. Like, it's handicapping you. You did not know that Brigham Young was a polygamist.
No.
That's just crazy.
How's that? It's insane.
Okay, so let's move forward. You guys have found each other.
Yeah.
And you've been stuck basically in the apartment, I assume, during COVID. And so that's lifting. You guys aren't going to be together forever. That's just the way it works in the mission.
Sadly.
I guess the question is, you're going to go home eventually, both of you. You're going to have to go home. You're going to have to do your homecoming, where you're going to have to get up in front of everybody in the ward and everybody you know.
Oh man.
And bear your testimony. I mean, have you guys given a lot of thought to like what's the life after the mission and how you're going to navigate that?
No, not really. It's stressful enough out here that you just need to take it one day at a time just to try to function.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I completely get it. And you know, it's kind of, you guys are kind of behind enemy lines. Not that Mormons are technically enemies, but it's that's probably the closest analogy I can come up with, is you're kind of spies behind enemy lines in World War II, right? And you just got to get through it. And I think whatever you have to do to get through the day to day is just completely fine. One thing I did want to ask you guys too is, I have it on pretty good authority that you are not the only active missionaries who are listening to this show.
Definitely not.
And I would like to ask you guys what you would say to anybody else who might be listening, who's maybe not as lucky as you two have been to find each other, right? Like, what would you say to those people to help them get through?
Well, I mean, if they're in my position and stuck where they have to stay out and finish, like I kind of am, I would definitely just advise them to, I mean, that's a tricky question. There's so many different things. It just depends on your companion, really.
Sure.
I think really just try to match the level of obedience that your companion has. Because if your companion is someone who just doesn't care very much and still believes, you can still have a lot of fun with that companion. But if you have a companion who is super go
obedient,
you just kind of gotta just get through it. You just gotta do it, and you can try to soften them up a little bit, but from my experience, you just kind of gotta put your head down and get through that couple transfers with that crappy companion.
Right. And you had mentioned that you had a friend who sent you a device, which kind of gave you the window to the world that made your life out there better and saner. Would you recommend active missionaries reaching out to that friend of theirs out there? I would venture a lot of them have that friend.
Yeah.
And seeing if they can hook them up.
Definitely. It just depends on if you want to do that. Yeah. I think if you feel like you can hide it well enough, because that's really what it's all about. It's about not getting caught and being able to finish out your mission for whatever reason you have to finish it. Because doing something like that is risky, because if you do get caught, you'll get sent home for it.
Right. And again, for non-Mormon listeners, the familial and societal pressure that is on these guys and girls to go out, to serve with honor, to return with honor, and, to make the whole community proud is intense.
Fair.
And a lot of times, resources are tied into that. So do you want to go to college? Do you want to, have a car, et cetera, et cetera? So there's an intense amount of pressure and coercion brought on people like Elder A, who maybe didn't want to go in the first place. So people have a lot of reasons for staying out and sticking with it, even if it's not really working for them. Yeah.
But there's also the other side of the coin, I guess, where having someone send you out a device isn't your only option. If you do want to have access to the outside world, as we've already kind of talked about this over Twitter. We tweeted back and forth.
Yeah.
And I was able to find a way to get through the church's software that locks down the phones. And so if any missionary out there wants to have me walk them through that over email, they can just email me.
Yeah, go ahead and say.
At brokenmissionary@gmail.com. It's really kind of simple. and I'd be happy to help as long as you actually are a missionary.
Yeah, and that's not the first time I've heard that happening, that their missionaries are cracking their devices to get past the firewall. So, well, guys, this has been great. I really hope you take care, not only because you're kind of living behind enemy lines, but because of this stupid pandemic. And you're not home where you should be in quarantine, but out in some shitty apartment somewhere. So please take care and be safe.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I went through what you guys are going through. I was home. I was in an apartment. You know what I mean? Like I kind of had some space.
Yeah.
I could talk to people. I could read books. I could go, watch TV or whatever. So I just got to say I'm very, very impressed, you guys. I can't imagine the psychological and emotional stress you must be under, having to not just maintain your secret, but to also have to put on an act.
Yeah.
In order to maintain that secret. And I just, I wish you guys all the best, and just know that, it gets better.
Yeah.
You'll be home. You'll be home one day and you'll be able to do what you need to do. But, just hang in there, guys.
And Elder A, you'll be 26 someday. So it'll be clear sailing after that. So
hey, you never know.
You never know. Well, guys, thanks so much. Please take care, and we'll talk to you another time.
All right.
All right. Talk to you then. Bye.
Well, friends, that's it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. If you're a Mormon missionary who wants to totally screw things up for yourself by appearing on our show, send us an email at howto@howtoheretic.com.
You don't have to be a missionary. You could be a mission president. You could be a prophet.
Yeah.
Or something
An
like
apostle.
that. You can send us an email. Or if you've just registered the domain name, cheeseburgerbible.com, why don't you give us a call, and we'll negotiate a price for it at 903-8802. Which is 903-884-6986. I'm also on Twitter. We can haggle there.
And a hearty thank you to our most beneficial and lovely patrons.
And a big thanks to the Cheeseburger and our Bible, Cody Layton, for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in, friends.
Cheeseburger Bible. Bye, friends.